Greetings, mortals, and welcome. Please present your tickets for validation. Thank you. Your existence has been acknowledged, and you have been granted access every Thursday and Friday. You will be accompanying your guides, Krista and Brandy, along with their world-renowned guest. They will be exploring an intriguing tendril of what humans refer to as reality each week, as they strive to advance you further down the path to the truths of your physical earth and what lies on the other side. Remember to please keep your hands and feet in the vehicle at all times, and do not exit until the craft has come to a complete stop.
Why, Brandy, you've changed.
I've metamorphosized.
Yes,
Guys.
howdy. So yeah, you may have noticed, although you may be questioning yourself. No, Brandy and Krista are not here tonight. You're left with me, a guy, Jason McLean, who's done a terrible job of retiring from podcasting, and K-pop's most lecherous fan, Donny Cho.
That's me.
Yep.
We're like the two least blonde people you could possibly get to host
Except
a
I am.
show.
Hold on, I am blonde.
Blonde.
What are you talking about?
I thought you were a redhead. You're
Okay,
a ginger.
Well, blondes are technically within the ginger family. I'm technically a ginger. My hair's blonde, my beard is red. Actually, my beard's mostly gray now. So,
And the jury's still out on whether he has a soul, folks. Jury's still out.
I can assure you, I don't. I mean,
Yeah.
So
Those
yeah.
are true.
So we're filling in. The blondes are a traveling, and they made it to Texas. They're at the hotel, which is why they're in the chat, and because you can't chat and drive, it's not safe. But yeah, they're heading to San Antonio. They're going to be down there with the Clean Brothers thing, and actually, Tex and I will be with them on Saturday, so it's going to be a lot of fun. And the Blondes and Booze are going to be on Josh's show tomorrow, is my understanding. They'll be in office with them. So there you go. Mickey G, I won't say that I didn't think about having about doing the whole blonde wig thing, but I just didn't have time to get it. So I thought about it. That may be something we do in the future. So yeah. So don't worry, they're coming back. They're not gone for good. We are not replacing them forever. They will be back. But they will be on Josh's show tomorrow night. And there is again, Blondes, Booze, and the Woo still going on, but I think Rob is filling in, and someone else. Someone who's not Randy will be with him. That's all I remember. So yeah, again, you still want your blondes and your booze. You got, we're substituting a little bit. I'm blonde, technically, so it's okay. I'm like the stevia. Donny and I are like the stevia of blondes and booze replacement, right?
Yeah.
It's still good for you, right? It's not bad. It's not nearly as bad as like aspartame, right? Just saying.
A little variety. There ain't nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. It's like diet. Yeah, we're the diet blondes and booze, just, but it won't give you holes in your brain or formaldehyde. So there you go. One other thought. So again, if you're nowhere near San Antonio this weekend to go to the it's technically Schertz, Texas, which is just outside of San Antonio. So you can't go and see them then on the at this conference. You can, however, in just a few months, back in June, you can visit them, Tex, myself, and Bigfoot Michigan Rob, as well as Barton, Nunnelly, Daryl Denton, Greg Ogles, and Martin Groves. And I believe you will be there too, hanging around and causing.
I'll be there, but I'm mostly going to be just hanging out in like the parking lot, smoking cigarettes and
harassing.
You'll see me around there, folks.
Yeah, you'll see him around.
Yeah,
but yeah. So June 8th, right? Bigfoot, Alabama, the Alabama Bigfoot Conference It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be the Anniston Performing Arts Center. The tickets are $30 online right now. It's $35 at the door. So you want to go ahead and get yourself a ticket in advance, so you don't have to worry about, spend an extra $5. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Again, the Blondes will be there. We'll all be there. And I think Danielle is supposed to show up as well. And again, sort of hang out is my understanding.
She's going to be there. Yeah.
So again, the entire TFP crowd, everyone's going to be there. It's going to be a lot of fun. You can even poke Tex with a stick.
Yeah, that is true.
So
it's going to be a good time.
Hey,
that's a mighty fine drawing of Bigfoot, by the way, on that flyer, Jason.
Oh, thank you.
Mighty fine.
That's actually Bama Bigfoot, and the new flyers are out as well. So yeah, Bama Bigfoot is the official mascot of the Alabama Bigfoot Conference. So there you go.
There we go.
So yeah, tonight we're going to talk about living dinosaurs. And so for those of you who may not know me that well, I had a living pterosaur experience, but you know what? I already talked about this on Tuesday with Dean over at on not Mysterious Library, Untold Radio Network. So yeah, if you want to go over to the Untold Radio Network, you can look at Talking Weird. It came on this last Tuesday. That's me talking about my experience with living dinosaurs. But I wanted to go broader tonight with Donny, and so we thought we'd talk about something a little bit different, right? Not just everyone's going to talk about your Mokele and Bimbes, right? Everyone's going to talk about your Loch Ness monsters, your Keith Richards, your Kasai Rexes, things like that, right? Your living pterosaurs here in Texas, or in Papua New Guinea. So I thought we would start with something a little bit different. We have. There is enough history to look at something like, say, a living mosasaur.
Yeah.
Maybe floating around out there. And one of the stories is the U-28 creature. If you're unfamiliar. In fact, I love this image because this was actually done in like the 20s, right?
Yeah.
So this is really before, again, people tend to forget, it really wasn't until the 50s and 60s that people really started to know what dinosaurs, popularly looked like.
Yeah.
So this is based off of description of a U-boat captain, the U-boat 28. Happened during World War I. They sank a British liner, and essentially when they all got on board they surfaced and they watched it sink. And they were looking for survivors, things like that. Well, once it got a little bit under the water, that's when the steam engine itself actually detonated, and some of the other material that had it exploded. And in the explosion, there was this monster. And they estimated it to be about 60 feet long. This reptilian monster was blown out of the water. They said it writhed on the surface of the water for like 10, 15 seconds, and then resubmerged itself. The U-boat captain and several other people who were up there watching this through binoculars said that it happened, and they described it as looking like a very large like alligator with webbed feet is how they described this creature. And they said it was blown out of the water and writhed on the surface. Well, for those who are familiar, that sounds an awful lot like a mosasaur.
Yeah.
These were not technically dinosaurs. They were marine reptiles, right? Some of them were quite large, some not so. But if you don't know if you're unfamiliar with the mosasaur family, if you're unfamiliar with a lot of dinosaurs, you probably would describe it that way, right?
Yeah.
So it's very possible that this thing has been, and it'd be very easy to say, well, hey, hold on. If this thing has been around, why have we only heard this one report? There are other reports that have occurred in the last 50 years, 50, 60 years. But again, not a whole lot. But it would be fair to say, well, hey, is it possible that there are other people who have encountered this creature in the past, right?
Yeah, throughout history.
Yeah. So I would suggest that we could talk that a good place to actually look would be the Bible itself, right?
Leviathan, right? Because
Yeah.
that's what people like to bring up when people like speculate on whether or not the Bible does mention
Hmm.
creatures or monsters. The Nephilim is always number one, the Watchers, right? That's the
Yep.
one people love to bring up, especially when people theorize about cryptids.
Hmm.
The other big one is Leviathan, right? It's described as a sea creature, and a lot of people see it as like the biblical text describing an actual sea monster. So I
Yes.
don't know. Why don't you fill people in on what the text actually says about the Leviathan and what it actually is in the Bible?
Hmm. So okay, so there's actually there's two things we kind of need to uh, divide here, because Leviathan is used, it really pops up about three times. It pops up twice in Psalms. It pops up in Leviathan. So I'm counting that as one. It then pops up again in Isaiah, and it pops up in Job, right? So here's the thing: the first two, Psalms and Isaiah, it is not just, they are not using a material creature. It is a stand-in for Leviathan is sort of their stand-in with the chaos, for the chaos conf, the chaos dragon that we see through a lot of creation mythologies, right?
Okay.
Um, so it actually, in fact, the word Leviathan comes from the Ugaritic Lotan. In Psalms, which again David is writing, he's using Leviathan as a stand-in for Lotan, but it's also a stand-in for Satan at the same time, right? So it's one of those things where the author is using Leviathan as a stand-in for the Chaos Conf dragon, and as a larger sort of conversation about God's goodness. So it's a theological use. He's not describing a physical creature, right? Um,
Hmm.
Same thing in Isaiah, right? Isaiah, he's actually, you can tell, and the reason you can tell by the uses who they're sort of throwing shade at, right? Because a lot of the Old Testament authors throw shade at the surrounding gods, and this is one of the ways they do it. For Isaiah, it's a conversation again. They're using Leviathan as a stand-in for Tiamat, which is their chaos dragon, and interestingly has 7 heads. Same thing with Lotan. They all have 7 heads. And if you're like, well, that sounds like Revelation, score one for you, because that is exactly what is being said in Revelation. So so 2 of the 3 times that Leviathan shows up, it's used as a theological device
Okay.
and sort of a commentary on on the chaos surrounding ideas of the chaos dragons. It's a very long conversation that would bore people to tears.
So what about the whole association with the sea then?
So okay, so the reason this is where it gets interesting. So the chaos conf, right? All the chaos conf mythology, which is found worldwide, basically has this idea that there is this primordial sea dragon that is killed, right, by whoever becomes the dominant god of that pantheon. And of course, different things happen depending on the different traditions. There's actually an interesting conversation about how in Genesis the word for the deep or for the abyss that the spirit is hovering over may actually be related to the word Tiamat is derived from. But it's interesting because in there is no chaos conf. The chaos is already under control. Interesting but again, interesting topic. But the chaos dragon is a water monster. Like that's literally what it is. It's this primordial water monster.
So it's more like
And
coming from the abyss, right?
yes, right.
So then what if now see I'm not familiar with
Mhm.
Hebrew or the
Mhm.
ancient languages or anything like that. I just read
Yeah.
the Bible in English and tried
Mhm.
to read it in Korean, but that was real hard.
Oh, I imagine that
Uh,
would be really
yeah.
hard. Yeah.
But what if abyss instead of meaning like the sea, what if the abyss actually means space? What's the Hebrew word for space? Do they even
So
have a word?
they technically did not. It would just be
Yeah.
heavens. Yeah. I mean, they're because you have to remember a lot of this has happened. This is all being written the bulk of the Old Testament is written essentially in the Bronze and early Iron Ages. So they don't really have those concepts. Those concepts wouldn't evolve, and be discovered for really until very, very recently. So they didn't really have that idea. And actually, you've brought up an interesting point. It's a bit of a deviation from the living dinosaur theme, but I'm going to follow it. Hey, Rob. I see the girls seem to be safe, so that's good. Which is that I actually do think the abyss is talking. That is what it's talking about. Is this? It's not even space, but rather it's the. Again, better way to explain it would be like the dimensional material from which all things are formed out of. Because I think in day one he creates light. Day two he separates the water from the water. Like the abyss is opened and split. I think what we're seeing in day one and day two is the creation of space time. And then everything else is being built up within that realm, and that the ultimate Leviathan, the ultimate abyss, is essentially that dimensional volume down, right?
Yeah.
Membrane theory actually talks about this. Is essentially we're here on and there's dimensions higher, dimensions lower that sort of just goes down, right? Same idea. That may literally be what's happening. Is that it's talking about
so from like like the primordial dimensions. Well, then maybe that's what Leviathan is, then, like a creature from a primordial dimension, right?
Well, so that's a great question, because that gets us back into our topic. Yes and no. And here's what I mean. Yes, in Psalms, in Isaiah, that's what's happening, right? They're saying it is a stand-in for Satan while throwing shade at the surrounding religions. So you're 100% correct. That is what it is. However, angels are associated with stars, and even they will talk about stars as if they are angels all throughout the Bible, especially in the book of Revelation.
Yeah.
Well, we know stars exist, right? What they were doing is saying, here is something we can see. Here's something we can observe. And it's high above us. It's so, again, it's astronomically, they're these astronomical bodies, and they're brilliant lights. Remember, artificial light didn't exist yet. So these are literally the brightest things that you can see at night. And so they are associating that, right? The heavens, the glory of these beings with the stars in the same way. My supposition is that they did the same thing with surviving mosasaurs. Actually, there's a great comment here. Puck Elf says, it looks more like a large crocodilian species, maybe Sarcosuchus. Thank you. Again, I'm a Texan. I've never pronounced anything correctly in my life. So the thing is, the original drawing is just based off of what they saw, or what they were hearing described. And you have to remember, this is coming from the 1920s. People aren't very familiar with them. But the thing is, Sarcosuchus would probably have had a more shallow water existence, like we see with traditional crocodilians today.
Yeah.
So it'd be harder for that to remain hidden. But a mosasaur is exclusively water going. So that's why I'm putting my money on that one. But if people had come across this creature in antiquity, right? Particularly in the Mediterranean, and they saw that, it would be very easy. This very powerful armored creature that's in the water, it's in the Great Sea, right? It would be very easy for them to look at that and say, okay, that's Leviathan. Right? So hold on. Puck has a great response. Yeah, and I get what you're saying, right? Not necessarily, like, it doesn't have to necessarily be Sarcosuchus, but again, essentially,
Sarcosuchus was the most famous one, though, because that was known as the dinosaur eater.
Exactly.
That thing ate dinosaurs.
And again, mosasaur is just one. I'm sort of using, in the same way, I'm using mosasaur as sort of a generic species, because they came in different flavors, and at this point, they're probably even a different species from what we know from the fossil record. So yeah, same thing. I'm just thinking, I'm just gonna put my money on something that's more ocean going than anything that would live in a more traditional crocodilian thing. But again, it could be any number of things. Like we haven't even found every dinosaur that existed. So,
but you think Leviathan is more not an actual like living dinosaur, like a Loch Ness monster or a Mokele-Mbembe or a Keith Richards, but more of a literary device.
So it's both. I think what's happening in, like, with Job very specifically, right? Because you have it's mentioned right after Behemoth. it comes at the end of a long line of God is talking to Job and saying, hey, here are all and he's going literally up a chain of power of, it's like it starts with small animals and gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then he gets to Behemoth and then he gets to Leviathan, right? He's going up the chain of created creatures that they are familiar with. A lot of people say, well, Behemoth is this other mythological figure. And then that means this. And it's like, well, hold on. If we take what's being written in Job very literally, which I think we should, I think it's implied that we did, then why shouldn't Behemoth be a living creature that we're familiar with? And if that's like a sauropod, right? That's always the one that goes to because it's the most likely.
Can you fill me in a bit on when and where Behemoth shows up in the Bible and what context?
So it's in Job. It's right before Leviathan in Job, and that's sort of
right before. Like, so they're described as separate things.
Yeah, they're described as separate things. So what's happening in Job, right? God is showing Job it's like, hey, he's showing his power to Job. It's like, how powerful I am. He's like, look at these animals I've created, right? And he's going down the list of, and as he's going, you get bigger and bigger animals, including horses and cattle. And then he gets to Behemoth and he says, whom I created on the 6th day with you. So it's very specifically called out.
Be the bigger one, the biggest one. He's kind of like going up in size,
right? And so Behemoth is the biggest land animal.
So right? Behemoth could actually be like an elephant, literally.
Well, so a lot of people have speculated or have tried to explain an elephant as Behemoth. The problem is, very specifically, it says that its tail is like the cedars of Lebanon. And so a lot of people said, well, maybe
get in Lebanon
massive.
Like
those
redwoods?
They would be like the redwoods of California. Like these were massive trees. These were the trees that temples were made out of. They were absolutely massive.
So this has got to be like, if it's on that scale, it's got to be a sauropod.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of people think it is, because we have plenty of depictions of sauropods from the ancient world, right? Where they are clearly
stupid big. Like when you see the actual size of the fossils, like you see them like on illustrations, but when you actually walk up next to one, you're just like, this thing is stupidly big. Like, how do you even function being that big?
Interestingly, you can't get that big anymore because of the oxygen content.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing a lot of creationists point to, like myself, will actually point to as far as how different the world was, which also explains why you had such large things. Again, you had massive snakes, and there were people like, oh, the massive beavers and the glyptodonts, they didn't live at the same time the dinosaurs. That's a whole other show, guys. Whole other show. But that's why you had all these massive insects and massive other animals, was because of the oxygen content. Because now the sauropods today can get really, really big, but you're not going to get a Titanosaurus, right?
Yeah.
You're not going to get that anymore. But you can still get something that's really, really large. Like, again, Mokele Mbembe is thought to be a sauropod, right?
Well, like on the smaller end, right?
Right, yeah.
Right.
Again, but so again, Behemoth, more importantly, it's real quick, Puck Elf, I'm trying to find it. Mentioned that there were,
unlike Leviathan, which you think is more of a literary device, the Bible's mention of Behemoth, you actually think of it as an actual literal creature.
So that's what I'm saying, is I think it's both. I think what they're doing with so Behemoth is a literal I think it's a sauropod, right? It's described as a anyone who's reading this says this thing has to basically be a sauropod. And then the next step up is Leviathan, who is this greater it's called the King of Pride, where it's the king of the water monsters. And we have to remember, the ocean in Hebraic and ancient thought, really, that was the area of chaos. Humans had no control over it. But we have Behemoth, which it says it was created on the 6th day. That would mean it's not in a lot of people try to say that's the bull of heaven, and it's like, no, it can't be, because celestial beings were created earlier, before the foundation of the earth. So that can't be what we're looking at here. It's a physical creature. So then we look at Leviathan. They try and say, well, it's got to be the literary device. I would suggest that there is that there was, and probably still is, a species of creature alive today. Elf has a great point here. Could be there were certain basilosaurus which were basically whales but with teeth that looked more serpentine than modern whales do today, right? So he's absolutely right on that. Again, because the armor plating is described in Job when describing Leviathan, I tend to think I'm going more reptilian on it, but it's irrelevant. Whichever one it is, I still think it's a living, breathing creature that's being described. But I think what happens is it's so big, it's so powerful, it's so untamable. Everyone's like, okay, that we're going to call that thing Leviathan, but it serves in their head as a stand-in for, in the same way that stars are angels in their head, right? This living mosasaur or whatever it is to them Leviathan. It's their stand-in for the chaos dragon.
Yeah.
And that's how they're using it. So it is both a literary device and a real creature in their thought. And I think that's why we see it used one way in Psalms and Isaiah, but then another way in Job.
And that motif of the chaos dragon is pretty common in most like mythologies and lores and fables and traditions. That's one of those ones, like the Great Flood, that's kind of like a common through line in a lot of these traditions. It's interesting.
Yep. No, absolutely. I mean, it's in many ways you could argue it's sort of the earlier version of Godzilla. It's, in fact, you could argue that the Chaos Conf dragon, or that Godzilla rather, is in many ways a reflection of this concept, right? It is this massive, unstoppable creature that comes out of the ocean, right? Humans can't contain it. It stands in defiance of humanity and usually condemns us, right? Depending on which movie you're talking about. There's a condemnation of human activity.
You're right, man. Now, the more I think about it, the more you describe or talk about like Leviathan and Behemoth, I'm just thinking, damn, was the Bible describing Godzilla? Was Godzilla in the Bible? Could you imagine?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. I think that may be exactly what we're talking about. It's just in many ways, it's a retelling of this idea that's been there, since literally day one.
Yeah, because Godzilla is kind of like a literary device himself, right? Because he is. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's an analogy of, the nuclear bomb, right? He's the chaos dragon.
Yeah, he's the chaos dragon, and again, it's whatever they want him. It's whatever device you want him to play, right? In the original one, it's the pain of the atomic bomb. In -1, it's sort of that. It's that, but it's also the pain of survivor's guilt, right? And the sins of Tokyo. In Shin Godzilla, it's just nuclear power, but it's the power of it's nuclear power and mankind's Japan's inept government response to it and handling it. I forget the name of the movie. It's actually one of my favorite ones where he almost looks like a zombie. He has white eyes, where it's this, again, sort of like the sins of World War II is sort of the idea that he's manifesting as, right? So, hold on. We have to put a pause right here because
what happened?
Puck Elf is saying that there's a full budget Gamora.
I heard about that, actually.
Yeah, I would be 100% on that. If we can get a good big budget Gamera movie, heck yeah. All right, back to okay. Little behind the scenes on me. I'm certain when I announce, when everything's live, the blondes will have me on to talk about it. But doing some comics behind the scene. They're going to be digital, so you can go to the website and read them. One of the stories, and it's one of my favorite stories, is the Beast of Busco, which is a giant alligator snapping turtle. So there will be a story. Anyway, back to the story. So yeah, I mean, in many ways, Godzilla is just a reimagining for the modern world of the Chaos Dragon, of Leviathan. So does that mean?
Dude, I had a pet turtle as a kid, and I definitely named him Gamera. There was no other name to give him.
I've had so many pet turtles. I love turtles.
And
turtles
you
are
named
my
one
favorite
Gamera, didn't you?
No, I never did. I never did.
What about Michelangelo, Leonardo, Raphael, Donatello?
I plead the fifth.
Sure. Okay.
I plead the fifth.
Okay. Speaking of living dinosaurs, right?
Yeah.
So, how likely do you think it is, Jason, that a McLean, a small sauropod, is running around out there in the Congo? Honestly,
I think we've got a really solid chance on that.
Some of the accounts do seem pretty legit because it's a lot of the locals, and they don't really have many. It's not like some random tribesman in India is trying to make it big on YouTube, you know?
Right. Well, and that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
Is that the initial stories of McLean and Bembe, we know they predate the last 200 years, right? So it's not like there's a lot of influx. It's been around. And the thing is, we have accounts from the 50s of people talking to them that said, yeah, we've of them describing Mokele and Bembe. And then again, in the 50s and 60s, people come and saying, hey, here's pictures, and because this was a legit mystery that a lot of people were trying to figure out. They're like, maybe it's they're trying to describe a form of Komodo dragon, right? They'd show them pictures of Komodo dragons, and say that's not it. They're like, well, maybe it's a rhino. They're like, we know what a rhinoceros is, we know what a hippopotamus is, right? We know what elephants are, we know what giraffes are. It's none of these things. They showed them a picture of a sauropod, and they said, that's what we saw. That's what we killed. That's what we ate. So Mokele and Bembe, there was a Mokele and Bembe that was killed and eaten in the 50s. They said they got sick, but that's how they described it, right? But then the thing is, people have found trackways. They found them in the 50s, and there was, I forget the name of it. Again, go to that. We did a whole episode on Mysterious Library of this documentary where they went and looked for Mokele and Bembe, right? And at the end of it, they actually do find what appears to be a trackway, right? So that's the thing, is that there's legit reason to think that this is absolutely true. To Puck Elf's point, he says, it's a myth. Well, the problem is it's a myth that's been around forever. Like, this isn't a new phenomenon. Now, that being said, are there people who are scamming people? Yes, but that's like it with anything else. But yeah, it's a much older story. Like, this is definitely part of their lives. And there are people who say, yeah, we see this thing, not all the time, but it is there. But yeah. This is, this originated. If this was something that only came about in the last 20 years, I wouldn't believe it. But the problem is, this is a story that's been around for a while. People have heard it for a while, and they've investigated it for a while. And there's really no, and they were very adamant in the 50s that they were looking at a dinosaur, or essentially and they've drawn them. Like, they've drawn what looks like a brontosaurus out of a cartoon.
Can I tell you about a living dinosaur story that I'm not sure if you've heard of before?
Yeah.
It's called the Lake Tanchi monster.
Okay.
North Korea has a cryptid. It's the only cryptid story I know in North Korea, right?
Okay. Interesting.
So, you know how on the border of North Korea and China, there's the tallest mountain in, I think it's the tallest mountain in that area, right? The tallest mountain in Korea for sure. But it's called Mount Pektu. And it's actually kind of like on the border of North Korea and China. On top of this mountain is basically an extinct volcano.
Right.
So it's basically the top is a crater and it's a lake. So the top of this mountain is a full-on lake, right? It's
like Lake Titicaca in South America.
It's pretty remarkable looking, and the lake is extremely beautiful. There are all these pictures. Can't go there because you got to go through North Korea.
Yeah,
but there have been sightings of this creature, very much like a Loch Ness monster. Like, it looks like a dinosaur. It's described as having like a body more akin to like a hippo, but a reptilian head. And they've been seen swimming around there, frolicking around there, but you can't investigate it because it's in North Korea.
Because it's in North Korea, yeah. Well, that's interesting. Yeah, I hadn't heard about that one. It's sort of like the lake, I think it's Vilkai monster. They've actually got photos of something that looks really legitimately weird.
Yeah.
I won't say that the one, I'm probably mispronouncing the name. It's in Russia. I won't say that that's necessarily a living dinosaur because I don't know that we have enough information to kind of lean one way or the other. But yeah, I mean, there's stuff like this all over particularly in the water, right? There's stuff all over the world.
Yeah.
Where there are these creatures that just don't seem to fit, right? Real quick, Southpaw asked, why did they get sick from eating it? We don't know. We haven't killed one to test its meat, but I mean, there's some things you can't eat, so I don't know.
And some things that are only edible if you cook them right, and they probably didn't know how to cook that meat right.
Yeah, that's entirely true.
Yeah.
And real quick, Puck Elf, again, being on point here, said, isn't there a story that some giant about a dino with a giant rhino-looking swamp beast? Yeah, that's also in the Congo. It is a name I cannot begin to pronounce. I've tried. I've failed every time, so I won't. But it's essentially, they call it the elephant killer because it is very clearly a ceratopsian. But it only has one horn, and there was far more than just triceratops.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
And a triceratops would definitely mess up an elephant. That wouldn't even be a question. Get out of here, elephant.
But this one, but there were a lot of them that only had like one horn in the middle. So, and it seems like that may be what we're dealing with on that. So, yeah. But yeah, so yeah, I mean, that's the thing is you have stories from around the world. You have dragon stories from around the world. Because dinosaurs it's a new word. It's not even 200 years old at this point. So it's a brand new word, and you have to realize, well, if people were seeing these things back in the day, they would have called them dragons. That's it. I mean, that's how they would have described them. And so you see them popping up in these lores. And so a lot of the mythologies that we have today are inspired by contact with these creatures. At least that would be my supposition.
Dragons are like spiritually enlightened dinosaurs. Like if a dinosaur finds like nirvana, like if they evolve and they gain intelligence and they meditate and they get all spiritual, then they become a dragon. They've graduated spiritually.
Well, that's probably Asian dragons would be.
Or maybe if a dinosaur like finds Jesus.
Right.
And then he's like, I'm a dragon now.
There you go.
Like, you believe that, little dinosaur? You believe that.
You believe that.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. My favorite. It's one of those internet things, and it is the dumbest thing ever, but I love it because I'm a dad. It's one of those dad joke things. Well, hold on. For the record, Jason Broussard, by the way, great name. He said, my people can help control giant sea creatures. We just need a 100-yard pot and 10 and 7 tons of crawfish boil. I'm right there with you on that. I'm all about that. It's by the way, spilling tea, it's okay. I put myself to sleep all the time. I just completely lost my train of thought. Dang it. The story. One of those internet things. It's God creating the animals, and he creates the fire ant, and he says, "You are the fire ant." He goes, "What does that mean?" The fire ant's like, "What does that mean?" He says, "Well, when you bite someone, it will burn like fire." So the ant looks at him and goes, "I'm a dragon." God's like, "No, that's not what I mean. I'm the teeniest dragon."
That's awesome.
It is so stupid. It is so stupid. I love it. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's like that's how these things would have been interpreted back in the days, that there were dragons. And that makes sense. Now, again, I will say not all of them would have been necessarily dinosaurs proper, right? Because a mosasaur isn't a proper dinosaur. Pterosaurs, like the one I saw, are not proper dinosaurs, but we associate them with dinosaurs, right? But like, I think there's a really good argument to be made that Megalania, which is essentially a Komodo dragon the size of a school bus, right?
Yeah, that wouldn't be fun to be around.
No, but I would argue that there's a really, really good chance that that's the basis for the Chinese dragon. I mean, if you look at them, it's a long serpentine, but quadrupedal dragon. I think it's a much. And the thing is, we have these stories from India that, again, which is right, India and China's right there. They have a very similar creature, and the thing is, the Chinese dragon goes back thousands of years. That design is an ancient thought as far as how dragons should look. So I find it very, very hard, right? To believe that just sort of evolved out of nothing.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on you've probably heard the arguments about people coming up with these cyclops from the Greek mythology from like woolly mammoth skulls because it looks like it has one eye. Do you buy into that?
I did at one point. I thought that would be a thing, but essentially what I've sort of come to grow out of, 20 years ago I was more along the thought of, a lot of these things are just misunderstood, bones, but it's like, I sort of looked at it myself and said, Jason, are you telling me the Greeks didn't know what an elephant was? Like, they knew what elephants were. They knew what the hippopotamus was. They knew what all these creatures were. They knew what they were. They knew what they were. So I doubt that they would have just said, hey.
They were going back and forth to Egypt all the time. That was like their vacation spot.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why that's my problem with a lot of this is it presumes the stupidity of ancient man, and the problem is we have no reason to think these people didn't know what was going on. Right? A lot of ideas are born out of this. Well, we're the modern people. We've got cell phones and Zevias and microphones, and we know what the world is. Those people were dumb. And I'm like, I'm sorry, they did things. They knew things we don't know today. I'm sorry. That is, they were not stupid. They knew what those bones were. I do think, however, the problem is the Cyclops itself was just that was a story, but it was based on the idea that there were giants because people actually encountered real giants, right?
Yeah.
So there you go. The problem is we have a Puck. That's a long conversation. I don't even want to go off on that one. Donny just saw it.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, it's like
there's a backstory to that.
There's a long backstory to that. Anyway, the problem is in modernity we have absolutely, it's our arrogance and hubris that makes us look back and say, oh, those guys must have been dumb. They were not dumb.
I don't know, like looking back at that time and looking at all the, right now is more advanced and there are all these comforts, but there's also a lot more angst and a lot of things that can, warp people's sense of realities. And sometimes I think to myself, man, maybe it was better to live back in ancient times, minus all the, barbarians and crazy diseases and animals that will outright eat you.
Eat you. It's like the lack of toiletry. Like, it's like the guys, as much as it's nice to kind of look back and be like, man, that would have been nice. Like, no, we do.
No, you could be like enjoying your day. Oh, it's Sunday, we're chilling, and what's that over the hill? Oh, it's a horde of Mongols, and that's a wrap.
Yep, exactly. Exactly. Although I will say this, I was some historians were going back and forth. One thing they talk about, and again, this is a great example of what we're discussing about how it's like we look down on history. We call it the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages, and it's like, well, it's because popular thought. Oh, it's because this is when people were the dumbest, right? But most actual historians who've researched said no, that was one of the highest. The Middle Ages was literally one of the for Europe was one of the most technologically advanced societies that had ever existed at the time. And we forget that because there are things that we forget, right? There's writings that we focus on. To your point, there were definitely periods where people were looking at the Roman aqueducts and thought they were made by giants because they're like, no human could build that, right? But when we get into the proper Middle Ages, there were a lot of people, there were a lot of engineers. They never really lost that knowledge. The problem is we consider it's like, well, weren't they all illiterate? No. The problem is our writings are skewed from the people who read Latin because that was the educated class. And so if you couldn't read Latin, you weren't considered to be educated.
Yeah. And also, the whole Middle Eastern Islam world was going through its renaissance, and then that got abruptly halted by the Mongols.
Yes.
Right. That's the other reason why we're not having to all read Arabic, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
That got abruptly halted.
But back to that idea, right? So if we go through history, we have all these people, they know what they're seeing, but they are describing things the only way they know how, right?
Yeah.
So how many creatures are mythological today that we just don't know about because they did go extinct 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago?
Yeah.
And so now we look at them like, oh, those never existed because they're just myths, and only stupid people create myths, right? Modern world. And then, and so that's how we view them, but they were just describing what they saw the only way they knew how. Again, living dinosaurs. There's some great questions I'm going to hit up in the second half of the show. But it's like, how would you describe something like a velociraptor or an oviraptor, right? Really an oviraptor because they had beaks, right? Because we know theropods had feathers now. We didn't know that until like literally the last 20 years.
Yeah.
We didn't realize that the theropods were warm-blooded until 30 years ago. Geez, the fact that I do have to say 30 years ago bothers me. It means I'm getting old. But, right? It's one of those things where it's like, hey, how do you describe something that's tall, has a beak and a crest, and has feathers on its head and maybe its upper body and on its hands, but it still has claws and has a long tail, right? And is bipedal. Like, how would you describe that? Except it was like a dragon that had feathers. It was like a chicken dragon. Well, that's what we call the cockatrix.
Or like a Rodan.
Yeah, exactly. So there's the thing, right? It's like, hey, how is it that we have creatures that keep popping up in mythology that are perfectly describing animals with features we didn't know that they had until 30 years ago or 20 years ago? I mean, that's a thing. Like, what's the easier what's the easier option here? They saw something that was real and they described it, and it shows up in their accounts, but maybe they're extinct today, or some are just hidden, like Mokele Mbembe or Keith Richards,
or the Loch Ness Monster.
And so for us, it's just mythology, but for them, it was reality because it was, and it works its way in. The Hebrew, they see Leviathan, they see this giant Leviathan creature in the water that can't be stopped or contained. And they're like, that is our envisioning of the chaos monster, right? Today, we envision him as Godzilla, but it's the same, and so, I mean, you could argue Godzilla in many ways is the same sort of thing because we're looking at, they were looking at prehistoric dinosaurs, again, marine prehistoric dinosaurs. And that's what they came with was with Godzilla. So, I mean, I think it's all sort of this full circle thing. We have these living dinosaurs that we encounter for thousands of years. They get passed down to us as stories. And when we're telling stories, we lean back on dragons and we keep going back to them because
then dragons keep going back to chaos dragons.
Yeah.
And then chaos dragons keep going back to Godzilla.
Mm-hmm.
I think Godzilla is the ultimate living dinosaur.
Yeah.
I think he's the livingest dinosaur of them all.
Particularly when we understand the power of the story, I would agree with you.
Yep. You know how like a lot of Christians are always like, Jesus lives, right? I want to be the guy that walks up right behind him and be like, yes, and Godzilla lives too. Like, and be all serious, like, yes, Godzilla is real in your hearts. Believe in Godzilla.
Well, Godzilla lives in the hearts of all who seek for a better world.
Yes.
Not in the same way Jesus does, but he's still there.
There's extinct dinosaurs, and then it's a scale, right? There's levels to this.
Right.
There's extinct dinosaurs, and then there's living dinosaurs. and then there are exalted dinosaurs.
Exalted dinosaurs. I like that. So they're no longer dinosaurs that
they're
have
no longer dinosaurs.
They're
They're dragons now, baby.
They're
and the dragons. They look up to Godzilla and be like, "Damn, I wish I could be that cool."
I wonder who else looks up to Godzilla.
Actually, have you been watching that Monarch series on Apple?
No, I don't have Apple TV.
See, yeah, I don't have it either, and I heard it's not that great of a show, but I have watched like the scenes on YouTube, like some of the fight scenes.
Mm-hmm.
There's this one pretty cool fight scene where Godzilla, because it's a show where they actually introduce new monsters.
Finally,
but it's interesting because the monsters
after the break.
I like the monsters they introduced that are like sort of big, but not really big. Mm-hmm. Like that giant spider in Kong Skull Island, like that. Remember? Yeah. They're like big, but they're not like Godzilla big, but they're still pretty big, right? So, yeah, and then this show they have like a giant crab, like the size of a school bus or whatever.
Are they doing any classic monsters? Or are they all creating these new monsters out of?
Well, here's the thing. There's this one scene where Godzilla is like this. The protagonists are in this sub kind of thing, and they are being attacked by a legit dragon, like from Game of Thrones, that kind of dragon.
Okay,
and it's pretty badass, right?
I need to put a pause on this because we need to take a 5-minute break. So. Okay. For everyone who's listening, if you're listening on KPNL and all that, you're going to have to go hop over to YouTube to hear the rest of this story. And for everyone who's in chat, we'll catch y'all in 5. So smoke them if you got them.
All right. See you in 5.
what I fear. Let the thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
And we're back.
We are back, and we're back talking about living dinosaurs.
And Godzilla.
Yeah.
Living dinosaurs like McLean Bembe, the living pterosaurs that I saw, Keith Richards, Godzilla. It's all good.
You know what I was thinking about during the break? I was thinking if gray aliens came along, right? And they took a sample of T-Rex's DNA, and then maybe they took like a blood sample from Jesus himself, and they spliced it into like one creature, like in their UFO lab.
Yep.
Bam, you got Godzilla.
You know what? That's chat keeps moving. I keep trying to push buttons to star things. I mean, there you go.
There you go.
That's a possible. So real quick, let me answer a couple quick questions that popped up because I think that's a great question, right? It ties into Glenn Dannison's question as well. But let's start with Ristel. Ristel said, "I'm not sure if they're considered dinosaurs, but what about the pterosaur reports we often hear?" So again, pterosaurs are not dinosaurs technically. They're flying reptiles. However, they are seen and they are associated with dinosaurs. And I actually talked about that in depth. I talked about that on Tuesday over on the Untold Radio Network with Dean. We used to do a show together, but it's on Talking Weird. You'll see my beautiful face. And
you know what I call pterosaurs actually? I call them unofficial dinosaurs, meaning that every dinosaur book you get as a kid, you're going to see pterosaurs, at least in the background, right?
Oh, yeah.
So they belong in a club. Yeah, they might be, biologically different from dinosaurs, but they deserve the title.
That's what I'm saying.
They've earned it.
That's what I'm saying. I think they've earned being dinosaurs the same way the mosasaur has earned being a dinosaur. I'm right there with you, man. We're right there.
Yeah.
So Glenn asks, so dinosaurs breathe fire, and it's kind of connected to the story about, or to Puck El's question says, dragons equal genetic fears from evolution. Maybe if you're an ape, what's scary? Snakes and venom in trees, eagles stealing your kids, brush fires, hence the fire. So the thing is, and I think this is where we spend a lot of time separating the theological Leviathan from a physical Leviathan, right? That they were same word and same idea, but it's like there was a physical creature that was then used to expound upon theological ideas, right? And concepts. In the same way, literally the exact same way Godzilla is, right? Godzilla is a creature that is used in story to deal with certain ideas.
Yeah.
In the same way dragons are, which again is what we've done with dragons the entire time. So this is where we kind of have to get to an interesting point. Classically, dragons didn't breathe fire. Not entirely. It depended on where you were and what time we're talking about. When we talk about dragons today, we are talking about fantasy dragons that have been created as an amalgamation of a lot of different thoughts over the last 1,000 years, right? And so I don't necessarily think that most of these creatures did anything like that. However, it's possible that some could have, right? Not necessarily breathe fire, but could have had a venom of some type.
There are a lot of like spitting venomous
snakes,
spitting reptiles and animals, and
there's all kinds of creatures that do that kind of thing, right?
And you got Komodo dragons, which are like so nasty that they're accidentally venomous, you know?
Yeah, it's a very specific bacteria.
Mm-hmm. Whoops, my hygiene is so bad, but hey, I guess it works.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's the thing, right? We again, because we've grown up with these ideas of what dragons are, that's our culture's translation of a dragon, and it's born out of a lot of different cultures. So to Elf's question, right? The modern the modern idea of a dragon is evolved out of these things. I would suggest necessarily though that the more classic, when you actually do a deep dive on the classic dragons and the actual original sources, not people telling you what other people were telling you about what other people said, when you look at their actual writings, it's very clear when stuff is mythological, right? And when stuff's literal. There's like, this is something we encountered and we had to deal with it. And then there's stuff where it's like clearly a mythical creature that's being used to tell a story, right? You can tell the difference in the writings. So I'm not again, as a young Earth, I'm willing to be flexible in what young means. Donny and I literally did a show on this last week.
Again, well, if you think about it, we did a trilogy.
Yeah, we did sort of a trilogy on it.
Yeah.
I'm doing a terrible job of retiring from this whole podcasting thing.
And by the way, for those of you who are wondering, the climax of our Young Earth Living Dinosaurs debate, the climax is my episode on Pluto. Folks, come check out Donny Cho Says Stuff and check out the episode of Pluto. That will be the denouement.
Yes, I forgot we didn't pimp your channel. Okay, Donny Cho Says Stuff.
Yeah.
If y'all haven't seen him before, go hit up Donny on Donny Cho Says Stuff.
My show's pretty ridiculous. There's a lot of foul language on purpose, and you will be dumber for having listened to it.
Yes.
Yes.
I can't argue that at all.
Yeah.
I'm usually a little dumber going on it.
I'm a little bit ashamed of my own content. I'm not going to lie.
With good reason.
Ashamed. Yeah.
With good reason, sir.
I don't tell people at work about what I do in my free time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel you. What was I saying? So I don't necessarily think of dragons as a race memory thing of, these, traumatic. And I think a lot of people who point that stuff out, I don't think it's wrong to note that that's what we're putting in modern dragons, right? So I do agree to that point that the modern fantasy dragon, they are taking predator.
And they didn't always fly either, right?
Oh, exactly. And that's my whole point, right? Is that the actual ancient stuff that sort of spawns the idea of the dragon, these are varied and very different ideas. They all have, again, the wyvern, I think, are the living pterosaurs. The cockatrix is probably a theropod. And again, also understand that, there are things where like, oh, they can turn you to stone by looking. Yeah, that's mythology that happens over time, right?
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where look at the original writings themselves, what they're describing. They're having conversations. The basilisk was just an Egyptian cobra. That's all it was, right? But it grows and evolves because they don't have zoos to go and like, oh, that's what a cobra looks like, right? Kind of a thing. So we have to be able to separate the mythological from the original. But the thing is, there are two different types of dragon stories. There's the mythological dragon where it's talking to you, or there's a purpose for the epic hero to slay or whatever. But then you have these physical dragons that people are encountering and saying, I don't know what that was. But we had a thing over there. It was a dragon, and we had to kill it because it was eating our sheep.
You know, the other thing you have to consider in the ancient world, a lot of these big wild animals, the megafauna, were mythologized by people who, earlier I mentioned Greece and Egypt, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, people from Greece went back and forth to Egypt, but not everyone in Greece went back and forth to Egypt.
Yeah.
So in a lot of situations, it'll be like this one guy from a town who'll go to Egypt, see like a hippo or a lion, come back to Greece, and then people in his hometown be like, "Yo, what'd you see over there?" "Well, I saw this thing called a hippo," and they're like, "What was it?" And he would describe it to them, and they're like, "Yo, that thing sounds terrible, right?"
Yep.
Because people knew about these wild animals, but not everyone actually got to physically go there and see for themselves.
Yeah.
They just heard about it from like the writings of a traveler.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Like imagine describing like a Kodiak bear to someone who's like from the other side of the world who's never even heard of something like that before.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, exactly. And that's the thing is we see these kinds of things. If you're unfamiliar with one of my favorite things, Albrecht Dürer, he was a brilliant artist from way back in the day. One of my favorite things he ever did was his drawing. It was an etching of an Indian rhinoceros. And if you go look it up, Albrecht Dürer's rhinoceros, we would look and we would laugh because it's like, what the heck? But you have to remember, he's drawing from what someone has told him about seeing this thing. It looks like a superhero rhino with armor and all. Like, it's nuts. It is nuts.
Yeah.
But that's the whole point, right? You see,
dude, I saw this one clip, right, where you know those documentary shows where you have people like naturalists go into like the Amazon and they spend time with like this really indigenous tribe who've never seen like modern culture before. I saw this one documentary where in this one clip the guy was showing, he had like his iPad out, and he was showing them like ocean footage.
Yeah.
Like great white sharks and like whales. And you could see the tribes people just huddled around this thing, just being in like their jaws or just, they're all slack jawed. They're just like, what in the hell is that? Right. They never even heard of a great white shark before.
Yeah. And how would you describe that to somebody that that has never seen the ocean? Like, how do you describe something like that to somebody? And that's kind of what we're dealing with a lot of these creatures that are probably, that a lot of them are probably extinct now.
Yeah.
And because there are no more great floods to fossilize things, we don't have any. All we have are the accounts of these people trying to describe what they saw. And again, we have to remember the person who actually encountered the creature is not the one telling the story. It's multiple, people later who are recounting the story. So there you go. And that's kind of where we sit with all this. Great question. Again, looks like Elf has some great questions tonight. He says, I think seraph meant serpent. It's in Hebrew. I'll help you out with that. And seraphim means flying serpent, doesn't it? Not exactly. So seraph does mean serpent in Hebrew, right? The seraphim again comes out of Isaiah. What Isaiah is doing is what's considered high poetry, meaning how he's writing, how the prophet is writing it's a high level of poetry. It's something we don't really read it this way because we're reading it in English. So the cherubim or the cherubim are the throne guardians of God. What Isaiah does is he renames them the seraphim. And the readers would have said, oh, like today we're like, oh, it's a different kind of angel. No, it's not what it is. He renames them the seraphim because what he's doing, again, this actually ties into why he uses Leviathan, right? He is creating this serpentine language so that the readers understand, oh, Leviathan stand in for Satan. Satan was once an angel, his demons, right? There's a lot going on there. So, however, Isaiah, there is a fiery flying serpent that is described, but it's not necessarily the seraphim specifically. There's a different, there's another encounter of that. So it's not the seraphim. I forget off the top, but it's essentially the seraph. It's seraph something specific, but it's the fiery flying serpent, which a lot of people, myself included, have speculated are actually pterosaurs. that are being seen. Instead of most theologians will say, oh, they're snakes that were highly venomous, but they move so fast that they were like flying was sort of this metaphor, right?
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people said, no, well, hold on. A lot of these accounts of pterosaurs, it appears that they can bioluminesce. And so it's a serpent that flies and it can actually light up, because there's a lot of stories of dragons in Egypt and that Herodotus talks about. So a lot of people said, hey, Herodotus talked about these dragons in Egypt. Egypt is where this particular section is dealing with this. So it's, why are we ruling out the idea of that there was some kind of flying reptile that they are dealing with, and that's part of the conversation, right? So there you go. But yeah, so yeah, that's sort of the things. Like, again, it's like if we realize these people if we stop thinking of these ancient cultures as stupid, and we take them seriously, we can understand that they were doing some really interesting things, and with their language, and we can start seeing, oh, maybe they are trying to tell us something. And sometimes they're trying to tell us they ran across things that aren't supposed to be there.
They did a pretty piss poor job of warning us about Dogman, though. Thanks for the heads up, ancient folks. Thanks for the heads up. Well,
that's why you have a Church of Dogman. Let's take care of that.
Yes.
Hey, they couldn't do everything. William Blake does points out there are tree snakes that fly, that do literally glide from tree to tree.
Yeah.
Yes. Those are, but unfortunately, I don't think those are found in Egypt. I can't remember if they're found in India exclusively or South America exclusively, but I don't think they were found in Egypt. But again, so here's the thing: maybe that's a thing that maybe that was a reality as well. Maybe that there was a tree. So great example there. Thank you, William. What if there were tree snakes at the time that were able to do the same thing, flatten their body and glide from tree to tree? So they're doing the exact same thing, but they're extinct today, but we have no record of them except for a few lines where they're called dragons by Herodotus.
Yeah.
Right. And in the Bible talking about these things. So again, they don't have to be, that's a great point. They don't necessarily need to be a pterosaur for them to be something that's just gone now. And so we're trying to figure this out, and we think that they're just stupid, and it's like, no, whatever they're talking about just isn't there anymore. So there you go.
Yeah.
So
flying snakes, I like to call those day ruiners.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Yeah, could you imagine just you're walking in the woods and all of a sudden a snake is flying at you out from a tree? You're just like, my day is ruined now.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it would ruin my day as much as the spider rain that Brazil gets.
Yeah.
I heard about that, and I'm like, guess what?
I was the one that told you about that.
No.
Dude, it's pretty gnarly, man. It's like a communal web. But what's interesting is that they all seem to be all different species.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You got to watch the footage, man. It's pretty gnarly.
No.
You'll see like birds get caught up in that in the webs. It's like real thick.
This is why God invented flamethrowers.
Yeah.
No. Guess where I'm never, ever, ever, ever going? Brazil. Anywhere where it rains spiders, I'm out.
It like literally rains spiders.
Yeah.
Like literally.
Just no.
Yeah.
Mm-mm. Not happening. No. Not doing it.
No, we're cool. No. We're cool. Yeah. I don't need that experience of, people are like, I must visit the Amazon on my bucket list. Nope, not on my bucket list.
No.
I don't need that on my bucket list.
Nope.
No.
Nope. Not doing it.
I can live my entire life never having seen the Amazon rainforest, and I'll be fine.
Yep. So we're wrapping things up on the idea of the dragon being sort of, again, the mythological dragon, the theological dragon being the sort of manifestation of your fears and dealing with things. I wrote a comic strip many years ago. It was a superhero strip, but one of the conceits was the things that gave people powers also changed certain animals from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Aquaman character, who was this big joke of a character, but who became a really useful character, was sort of the point of the story. There was a Godzilla-like series of strips that I wrote. And of course, my Godzilla ripoff was an alligator gar that had mutated. Do you know what an alligator gar is?
I wonder. I know what an alligator gar is.
Okay, yeah, that's what. Yeah, if you're in Texas, like that is the most terrifying.
So
thing.
You gave it legs?
Yeah, like he was a mutated alligator gar.
It had legs and was walking around.
Yep.
Did it have powers?
It not. Well, I think the ability to breathe out of water and walk around was enough of a power upgrade for it.
Okay.
But yeah, essentially the Aquaman commentary saves him or saves the day by controlling him, and now that became his steed. And so they'd go out into the ocean. So apparently you can breathe in the ocean too. I'd never bothered to put that. I didn't get to finish the strip, so But yeah, like for me, like if I were to create a dragon for Texas, it would be an alligator gar. That is the greatest fear North Texans have. It's not alligators. We're cool with alligators. It's not cows or buffalo. Well, maybe meth heads. But if we're looking at the natural world, it's either going to be copperheads, rattlesnakes, or alligator gar.
What about like a giant boar?
That would just sound very tasty.
What if it was like a boar man, like a hog man instead of dog man, but it was like its head was like a boar, but it had
like a moblin?
Yeah.
Boar man. Only the real ones get that.
That would be pretty terrifying.
Oh yeah, it would be terrifying, but that wouldn't be a dragon. That's what I'm saying. I'm just like, what would a dragon be from Maryland? Like, what would be your?
I don't know. It's probably all like covered in graffiti and smelling like stale beer and cigarettes and.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, Baltimore. Not all of Maryland, just Baltimore. Maryland itself is a nice place. It's just Baltimore's like that.
But like, what would be the creature that would be based on?
Oh, you know what would be the monster for Maryland? A giant crab.
Okay, so like a giant crab dragon.
Yep. Maryland crabs. Yep, it's got to be a giant crab.
I can see that.
Yep.
So, speaking of giant crabs, that reminds me, right? I throw my pencil. You were saying that they've got new creatures in that Godzilla's fighting, but none of them are like the classic creatures.
Yeah, no, but this one scene, it was kind of interesting because it was a straight up dragon, like out of Game of Thrones, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Smaug from The Hobbit. It was like that, a little bigger.
Yep.
And then Godzilla comes in, and you're like, oh, so this is what Godzilla would look like fighting like an actual like dragon.
Yeah.
Yo, they ripped that thing's wings up right off, just like they were paper, man. He just ripped that thing in half. It was pretty cool to watch.
Because that's how Godzilla do.
That's how he do. The funny thing was that dragon thought it had a chance. It didn't have a chance. No. That dragon should have bowed to his king.
Hey, Rodan did.
Yeah. By the way, I was just thinking this.
Mm-hmm.
You know that movie, right? The Godzilla King of Monsters.
Yep.
Overall, I have to say it wasn't a very good movie.
Right.
That Millie Bobby Brown stuff, it was all pretty lame.
Yeah. Agreed.
The scenes with Ghidorah were cool, but the fact that first scene was all like dark, that was extremely lame.
You couldn't see anything. I hated that.
But I have to say, the one scene that was so good was the Rodan scene when he awakens.
Yes.
That scene was good. That scene had no business being in that movie.
Yes. No, I agree. Like Rodan was my favorite part of that movie. Those scenes, because it was, I'm like, finally, we're getting some real Toho action here. It's like American. How is it you can spend $120 million on a movie and not be as good as a $14 million movie? I swear. That's what pisses me off more than anything else.
It's like they can make cool scenes, right? The Rodan scene, they can make a good Godzilla movie.
Yes.
Right? They have the ability. The ability is there. It's just the writing. Come on, writers.
Stupid.
How hard is it to write a good Godzilla movie? It can't be that hard.
It really can't be that hard. We've made, Toho's made plenty of them.
Yeah.
Really good ones.
I bet you and I could write a better Godzilla movie.
We probably could.
Yeah, I think we could.
And it would actually be I think we could write one about Godzilla fighting other monsters and would still be better.
I could write a better King Kong movie. Here's my concept, all right?
All right.
King Kong returns, but this time he comes with backup. An army of Bigfoot.
We're moving on.
Bam. Bam.
Okay, I will say this. I have a thought in my head for a story where it's sort of my take on, but it's the Beast of Busco, but I've mutated him a little bit to be more, bipedal. And Bigfoot. So essentially Bigfoot and the Beast of Busco are fighting. So it's a Kong versus Godzilla ripoff. I'm not saying I'm proud of the fact that that's in my head, but it's there. Yeah. So,
by the way, you know what I would say was the first depiction of Bigfoot in pop culture was?
James points out that I guess ours, particularly if Donny was involved, would be a Godzilla K-pop musical.
I'm not going to say, well, there are Godzilla themed K-pop videos out there.
Yes, there are.
They do exist. They are out there. And don't worry, on Donny's Cho Says Stuff, he will share. You will be able to partake in the delights of a Godzilla themed K-pop video.
I kind of have to admit, though, that feels a little. I mean, from a culturally healing perspective, yeah. I understand it, but it feels a little insulting to the K-pop. That's all I'm saying. A little history there. So,
yeah,
I'm just saying.
Anyway. Man, I totally lost my train of thought. I was about to.
I'm sorry.
What were we talking about before?
I think the fact that we're talking about writing a Godzilla flick on the Blondes and Booze channel means we should probably say goodnight. So, sorry, Krista and Brandy. But let's bring it back to, if y'all aren't in the San Antonio area to go to the Kling Brothers thing, we do have the Alabama Bigfoot Conference on June 8th at the Anniston Performing Arts Center. Go to BamaBigfootConference.com. That's BamaBigfootConference.com, and you will meet the Blondes and the Booze, as well as Daryl Denton, Barton Nunnelly, Greg Ogles, Martin Groves, Bigfoot Michigan Rob. Everything's hosted by Tex, and I will be speaking, and Donny and Danielle.
I'll be in the back, probably eating and
causing trouble
and like walking around randomly.
Yeah. If you're looking for someone to get into trouble with, that man, right there.
Yeah, and please don't all crowd me at once when we're all there. I'm actually very shy in person.
Yep.
Yeah.
He's not.
I'm very shy.
Yeah. Hey, you could probably poke Tex with the stick. He'd love it.
Yeah, I'm super timid. So.
Yeah, that's what I think about when I think about you, Donny.
Oh yeah, I was about to make one final point. I just realized something, Jason. I came upon an epiphany. The first portrayal of Bigfoot ever in pop culture.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. Was not Harry and the Hendersons.
No.
Do you know what it was?
Was it the $1 Million Man?
No.
Okay, what is it?
It was Donkey Kong. Donkey Kong was Bigfoot.
Hold on.
He tried to steal Mario's woman.
Hold on. Now, see, I was gonna do a joke and end with you saying like mid sentence that you got off, but I think you've thrown down because I think the $6 Million Man came first. $6 million.
Oh, did it? Oh, if it did, then it came. Yeah.
Yeah. Hold on. There, $6 Million.
Was that Man. The one where Andre the Giant was dressed up as Bigfoot?
Yes, I think that is.
Oh yeah, that was epic.
Hold on. Where is that episode information? All right. It's got 7.6 stars out of 10 on IMDb. Episode first aired February 1st, 1976. 1976. Okay.
When did Donkey Kong come out?
That's what we're looking at right now. Okay, Donkey Kong.
Yeah, Mighty Joe Young was in the 40s. Do you think Mighty Joe Young could count as a Bigfoot?
I think you could argue that I think you could argue
watch it as if that was actually
King Kong.
Yeah.
Hold on. I don't want Donkey Kong 64. Donkey Kong first video game. 1981.
Oh, it was close.
Yeah, so $6 Million Man beat him out. So here's the thing. I think you could argue that you could make an argument that King Kong is the first one, but the problem is it isn't directly a Bigfoot, technically.
Right.
So I think the thing is you have to know it's a Bigfoot. So $6 Million Man. There you go.
Yeah, Mighty Joe Young was just more like a gorilla too. So
yeah, it was a sequel. I thought it was a straight up sequel to King Kong. Mighty Joe Young was 12 feet tall. That is true.
About Bigfoot size.
Yeah. So there you go. So I'm still gonna say, you know what, Mighty Joe Young maybe, but that's still coming out of Africa though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Mighty Joe Young comes out of Africa, so I think that's the problem. Like, it's not a true Bigfoot; it's just a giant gorilla.
Mm-hmm.
Bigfoot's a very different thing. So, $6 Million Man takes the prize for the first true Bigfoot thing. By the way, what was his name in Japanese? Donkey Kong. I heard this. This was... Never mind. You know what? We'll move on. Sorry for ruining the show, Brandy and Krista. We love you, and we'll see you this weekend. Yeah, everyone else, behave yourselves.
Bye.
And go see Donny over at Donny Cho Says Stuff.
Yes.
Just prepare to be dumber.
Yes. Lots of that.